Hey everyone, so I've made quite a few videos relating to jailbreaking iPhones recently, and today's video is going to be something on the flip side, and it's actually going to be talking about the negative impacts of jailbreaking as well as all the downsides of basically having tweaks and having that kind of a setup. So what I'll do is I'll kick straight off with some of the downsides that I've personally noticed and I've personally experienced with regards to the tweaks that I have, as well as just the general jailbreak, having it in general anyway. So the first thing and the most obvious thing that most people would have noticed is battery life. And no matter how well you manage your tweaks, no matter how carefully you pick your tweaks, everybody will experience a detriment when it comes to battery life. No matter what you do, having any type of tweaks running in the background, even if it's just general UI tweaks, and as you can see from mine, I've generally tended to err on the side of just practical tweaks, things that make my life easier, and even still I've noticed a drastic drop in terms of battery life. As you'll see from my battery percentage at the moment, 96%. Today I only got up at 12 o'clock, probably took my phone off charge around 1ish. I've done a little bit of file transfers, things like that on it, but normally you're talking, and anybody who's had iPhones for a while will know that the 100 to 99% drop is always very, very slow. So iPhones traditionally over the years, your first 10%, so from 100 down to 90, it always seems like they've ramped it in such a way where it doesn't want to admit that it's actually dropping down, but in real life we all know that the battery life is probably deteriorating in the background. And it's not just on the home screen and usage, even on standby. Standby is probably the one that gets hit the worst with jailbreaking, and I've had I think it's Tritium, the tweak for, let me just scroll down. Yeah, so this one, the always on display, and initially I was using it. What I found was it's actually worse when the display isn't being used. So for example, when the device is in your pocket, it's either making use of the ambient light sensor or the proximity sensor to dim the screen and turn it off essentially. And what I actually found was whilst the phone was in my pocket, the battery life would just be dropping like crazy. And then as I was touching on earlier, anybody who's had iPhones will know that standby time on iPhones, it's literally days. I mean, you could literally leave it day after day on standby, and if you weren't to use it, it would still be pretty much where you left it days ago. That's something that I've noticed drops drastically whilst I'm at work. Part of that is down to poor cell signal, so it could be the fact that it's trying to find 3 network in the UK is atrocious. So anybody who's obviously thinking about switching over to 3 for their unlimited data plans, beware, because what's the point of a data plan that you can't actually use? But that's another video altogether. Basically, battery life, even compared to what I used to get, where I'm working exactly the same place, reception in theory should be better because according to 3 network, they've actually improved the cell reception, but I can literally see it dropping between breaks. So you're only talking 2 hours between breaks, and it will literally drop like 20%, and that's without any usage. Usually through a full day shift, I would normally expect to come home with between 60 and 70 at lowest. I was finding that I was coming home with less usage on shorter shifts. So normally I would be working 8-hour shifts. At the moment we're on rotating shifts because of COVID, and we're actually working on two shift patterns. We're only working 7 hours, so we're working an hour less. We've got 1 less break, so obviously I'm not using it as much, and I was finding that I was coming home with 40 to 50% battery life, and it's just atrocious. On top of that, coming on to the second point is phone temperature. Now, even if the battery isn't actually dropping in terms of the percentage in the top right, what I have noticed is the phone gets extremely hot randomly as well. So I won't even be using it. I'll literally just be sat there. I may have updated a tweak in the background, probably at the start of the day, and I check the phone and it's uncomfortably hot, and that will obviously lead to battery life, because the hotter the phone gets, the more detriment it will have on the actual battery, and also in the long run it will actually damage the battery as well, because as we all know, the batteries, they don't like being hot. So anytime the phone starts heating up, I almost find myself trying to protect it and turn everything off, kill any apps, all that kind of stuff. Now I probably don't help this situation by killing all of the apps in the background quite often, but because as I've touched on in a previous video, a lot of the times I have to kill those apps, YouTube Studio for example, just to get it to actually function correctly. So the second thing was the fact that the battery itself seems to be heating up quite a lot. Now one strange thing, if I just come into battery life, was before jailbreaking my battery health was actually on 95%, and as you can see now it seems to have jumped back up to 98%. It was originally dropped down to 98% after maybe like the first few software updates on iOS 13, and then once we got to I think it was 13.4, it actually dropped down to 95%. Now I have actually verified this by downloading a battery info app. I've actually got rid of it now because it was causing me problems, but I think it's called battery info. Yeah, it might have been one of these ones, I'm not 100% sure, but basically it gives you the actual milliamp hours detailed information in terms of what your battery is on, and I verified that, and it pretty much said, it confirmed what this screen is showing now, so 98%. So I don't know whether that's just Apple being cautious or whether that's Apple being crafty and actually getting people to consider that their battery is actually in worse condition than it truly is, and whether if that 2% is 5%, who knows, by the time you get to 10%, have they doubled that or tripled it, quadrupled it, and actually got it down to 80, maybe even less, and possibly suggesting you to get a battery replacement faster than you maybe necessarily need to. I mean, battery life is something I'll touch on in another video anyway. However, it's just one of those weird kind of quirks of having the jailbreak. Right, so coming on to the third detriment when it comes to jailbreaking, and this is one that's very impactful for me, is with regards to the camera. So I've actually noticed through various camera apps, generally I'll use the stock camera for the flexibility and the ease of being able to focus and everything like that, and also the audio performance as well. What I have noticed is the audio performance is a lot simpler to set up in the stock camera compared to something, for example, like Filmic Pro or double take, sorry, for example. So Filmic Pro is normally the main one, the main other one that I actually use, but double take I use that just for recording my daughter's videos, kids videos, things like that, just fun around the home where I want two angle shots at the same time. Now what I have noticed while using the camera is, firstly, obviously I had that bug with Tritium where it kind of disables, it messes up your camera on the lock screen. So basically whenever you lock your device and you try swiping into your camera, it would just glitch out on you. So it allow you to switch between modes, but it wouldn't actually allow you to take any photos or videos. So that obviously initially, alongside the battery drain and all the other issues, I disabled Tritium, but even coming into the home screen and clicking on the actual camera icon itself, I've still found that it gives me issues with drop frames. It gives me audio issues. So I've filmed videos of screen recordings where after I've they were mainly just jailbreak videos, and most of the point actually got across anyway, but there was instances where it would just randomly drop audio, and this isn't actually using any external mics either. These were filmed with the internal mics, and in my past experience, as I said, the main reason I use the stock camera app because it's pretty much flawless. Getting drop frames on an iPhone is so difficult. One of my earlier videos, if you haven't seen it, please go back and watch it. It was an Amazon unboxing, and what I did in that video was I had Filmic Pro running at its highest setting, so 100 megabits per second or whatever it is. I then had it airplaying to my TV in the background whilst also recording live video, and I had all of this running and I didn't have a single drop frame and no issues with audio. So the iPhone is more than capable of recording 4K 60 at extended dynamic range without any issues, and yet for some reason with this jailbreak, with nothing else running in the background, even on the stock camera app, I've had dropped frames, so much so that I had to actually stop recording. I had to go back, check it, and then make sure that the footage has actually recorded. In the areas where I actually noticed on screen on the viewfinder that I had dropped frames, the video itself was fine, but the audio had dropped out. So for that, I mean, for me personally, that is one of the biggest stumbling blocks when it comes to jailbreaks. And as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, generally whenever it comes around to the camera and things like that, that's normally what puts me off and ends up forcing me to actually just get rid of the jailbreak altogether. But obviously that's the third issue. Coming on to the fourth issue, and this is something that everybody has basically been bombarding the channel with and will be searching YouTube endlessly, and that is jailbreak detection. And this is for banking apps, utility apps, and obviously gaming apps as well. All three of those are slightly different. So utility apps, generally they're quite easy to get around. So for example, for me, my British Gas, my gas and electric supplier, that was quite easy to get around. Some of the banking apps you can then get around as well. Similarly with the gaming apps and also social media now as well. That was something that in the past jailbreaks, I've never experienced social media apps to actually glitch out in the way that they do, whereas now I've had quite a few people report to me. I know my son has actually experienced this on his own phone. I've not actually had a chance to get around to investigating this, but Snapchat, he got booted out of Snapchat, and I've had numerous people message me asking me how to fix their Snapchat, because every time they create an account they're getting booted out of it. I personally haven't actually experienced that. My Snapchat's been working fine. I don't actually use it apart from interactions with basically anything that my kids post or relatives post. I don't personally use Snapchat myself. Having gone back in daily just to check if it's actually working, it has been working perfectly fine. So it seems random in terms of how it's actually detecting. Maybe it's the devices, I'm not 100% sure, because it's generally older devices, not A12 devices, that seem to have been picking up this issue. So I don't know how that's actually working, but it seems random in terms of some devices work, some devices don't. But it's the whole headache behind jailbreak detection, and the fact that you've jailbroken your device, you've had it working in this particular way. And I get the fact that people don't want to go in and use the website version. They don't want to use Safari or Chrome or any other browser to actually go into the website and use those particular apps in that way, because they're used to it. It uses Face ID. It will just scan you, will go straight in. You don't have to enter no passwords, nothing like that. You don't even have to do the spiral wheel of your 3 letters from your memorable word or anything like that. It's just quicker. It's the ease of use, and that's what people have been used to by using all of these particular apps via the actual main app, and that's the flexibility and the ease of use that it gives you. Now once you jailbreak and everything is meant to get better, and all of a sudden you're having to use a browser link that logs you into the browser, and then you have to enter your password. Maybe your password's even safe, but your memorable information, where it asks you for maybe the 3rd letter, the 5th letter, and the 7th letter, that will never automatically input no matter what you do, because you can never predict which letter it's going to actually ask you for. So for that reason, I get why people don't want to actually do that. I mean, for me personally, the only particular one that I've really been affected by is Halifax, and that's only for my mortgage. And my mortgage, generally, I don't need to be checking that every day, so it's not something that has really impacted me too much. I've been lucky in the fact that my main banking is with TSB, and that's not been affected. I've tried to help people out. Obviously, if you check out my channel videos, you'll see that I've tried to post quite a few videos of Barclays, Lloyds, all these different type of banking apps that I've found workarounds for. So obviously if you are struggling with those, just go check those out as well. But it's not foolproof, so it's not every single app. There's still ones out there. For me personally, I mean, Halifax, I've not been able to find a workaround for that. So it's just the kind of headache and the extra work that you have to put in just to use apps that you've been using perfectly fine. And it's a different topic, but it's clearly nothing to do with safety in terms of the other side, as in the developers, because clearly if they're allowing you to go and log straight in using the website, then it can't be a security issue, can it? So, but as I say, that's a completely different topic. Right, coming on to the detriment, that is dropped frames in the UI. Now, anybody who's used iOS, and in particular on any of the newer devices, as I may have mentioned in the previous videos, may have not, I upgrade my phone every single year. I will make a dedicated video in terms of how and why I do this, but generally, if you think about, if you've got the latest device and you've got it on the latest firmware, which I generally tend to always have, you will never experience a drop frame on iOS. It's virtually impossible. I mean, iOS 13 was meant to have been this more of a bug fix kind of upgrade, and I believe early versions of it, whilst they still had some flaws, maybe apps crashing randomly, things like that, which in itself is quite unheard of on iOS. In terms of the actual system and the fluidity and everything like that, it was pretty much flawless. You weren't going to get any drop frames. Now, I personally have noticed just after jailbreaking and install a few basic tweaks, that I do actually get drop frames. Probably not so much on any of these videos. I probably won't be able to replicate it on any of the videos, but it's just in general use, and that's when it's worse, because that's when you're actually just using it for your personal use. It's not like you're recording, or it's not intensive. You're not doing anything intensive with it. Maybe it's just in the Photos app, maybe it's just in the Settings app, just scrolling, and it's those little things. It's such a third world problem, I realize. However, that is the privilege that you're paying for when you're buying an Apple product with and also having it running on the latest firmware. The fact that you don't want any of that lag, you don't want that stutter, and you definitely don't want those drop frames that just ruin the whole experience. I mean, iOS is quite lucky in the sense of how it works. The fact that the UI generally will not give you any stuttering or drop frames, but obviously when you're coming in and you installing tweaks, you're changing that, so you're actually creating that. And that's one slight niggle, the fact that you realize at the back of your mind that by installing these jailbreak tweaks and things like that, you're actually making the performance of your device worse. Some things will improve, no doubt, and you can install those tweaks to speed up all your animations. I personally hate that. I cannot stand having those animations where you hit an icon and it's just instantly there. The whole point of iOS is these smooth, gradual kind of animations, and the way everything just works so fluently. I cannot stand those tweaks where they just kill that completely. A little bit, maybe like 5% increase, fair enough, but most of the time they just ramp up every animation so much, and that in itself doesn't actually fix this issue either. All it is that you just won't notice it as much. I mean, if you speed up an animation and there's drop frames in it, yes, you're not going to notice as much, but when it does happen, it'll probably be more noticeable. Right, so the next one is unstable tweaks. So this is an obvious one, and obviously this is one that most people will have experienced. And I'm not just necessarily talking about the fact that you install tweaks that don't work. I'm talking about the ones that appear to be working. So as you can see, we have our on the left side of this, we have our list of tweaks that have a tick, some have a question mark. I'm not just talking about tweaks that are clearly not meant for this firmware. What I'm talking about are tweaks where you'll install it, everything will be working fine, and then you'll do something just a bit quicker. For example, I had a bug yesterday where I clicked on the weather icon, and I don't want to do it now because I've got a feeling it might actually cut off the video. But I clicked on the weather icon, and the first 2 times I did it, it resprung the device. Now this is a stock application, and what I'm assuming is one of the tweaks, possibly on the lock screen, possibly something to do with complications, because that I know does use weather information. But what I noticed just before it crashed and resprung was the fact that it wasn't actually using my location or the default stored location for my area. It was actually using one of the ones that I actually added for abroad. So for example, I think one of them was from Pakistan, from when I went on holiday, and it was trying to pull the information for Karachi or Lahore or something, and that's not my default. Default should be either your location services based one, so your exact location, or it'll be the town that you save for your hometown. But it was actually tripping out because by default it was trying to pick something that obviously wasn't where I was. So I don't know whether it was conflicting with the location services kind of trigger, but something was causing it to crash. Now that is a stock application. It resprung twice. Well, it crashed Springboard twice before it then went in fine. But that's just one of those things where it's an unstable tweak. You don't know what's actually causing that. You would literally have to go through and disable every single tweak or delete every tweak until you start to get things usable again, essentially. That's one of those things where really you shouldn't even need to be thinking about that. All right, the next one on the list is Semi-tethered Experience. So this for me personally isn't much of an issue because I generally understand how this works. This is more for new jailbreakers, and also for basically like my wife, for example, who she'll get me to jailbreak it for her. She used to install tweaks and stuff back in maybe iOS, I'd say 11-12 days, probably earlier than that even. The last phone of hers that I believe was jailbroken was probably the iPhone 6s, and she's now on the 10s Max. So as you can see, it's been quite a few generations since she's experienced the jailbreak. And with this current one, I set it up for her, I installed PeProvision, I set it up and came to it yesterday, and basically her jailbreak's gone essentially. I could probably fix it, but it's that headache of when something goes wrong. If you've installed this for a friend or family member, then they're going to have to come back to you to fix it, and it's just that inconvenience for you as well as them. It's the extra time. Obviously, as most people, if you've not already seen it, most YouTubers are actually posting videos now stating the fact that no PC or no Mac versions of these jailbreaks aren't stable, so they're getting revoked within days. So pretty much right now there isn't a usable and sustainable no PC method of the jailbreak. So by the fact that this being a semi-tethered experience means that if you were to restart the phone, or if it crashes, your battery dies. That's what actually happened for my wife. Her battery died. Normally she wouldn't even think about it. She just, once it dies, she just put it on charge, and next day it'll be back to normal again. And she actually said to me that, look, what's wrong with my phone? My jailbreak's gone. And I had a quick look at it, and obviously straight away clicked the fact that it's restarted, and because you've not run the jailbreak again, possibly that screwed something up. I may take a look at it, and I may make it as a separate video on that issue, because I have had a few people ask me with regards to that exact issue, the fact that the phone's either restarted or something, they've not realized it's gone overnight. The alt store ticket is obviously expired because they've been using PeProvision. So if I come into here, you can see my Unc0ver is 6 days overdue. Now I don't know whether I can fix that via the PC or not. I'll have a play about with that. Obviously for me personally it doesn't matter, because I'm using PeProvision, and basically I've got it set to 6 days, so it's pretty much ticking this over every single day. But for other people, the semi-tethered experience is going to be a bit of a problem. And that comes on to the next one, which is PeProvision. I've actually had a few people tell me that PeProvision hasn't actually worked for them, and basically their Unc0ver jailbreak has crashed on them because of that. Now the problem with PeProvision and I believe it's alt store, or there's a few other versions out there as well of basically signing sideloaded apps. The problem with all of these is if something goes wrong, you're not going to know until it's too late, and that's why I've actually set both of these to 6 days. So as soon as it ticks down to 6 days, it'll automatically re-sign, so that way at least it gives me more time to actually re-sign these applications if something were to go wrong. But it's just that whole headache and the nagging feeling at the back of your mind, where if something was to go wrong, you know you're in the position where, especially now that with 13.5.1 released, and no doubt Apple will be pushing a few more in the coming days and weeks, it won't be long before 13.5 isn't signed for anymore, if it's not already removed. I'm not 100% sure if they even sign for it right now, but as soon as they stop signing for it, if you have an issue and you have to restore, you're going to have problems. So it's just that extra headache and the extra step that you're having to do in order to maintain something that realistically should just happen in the background. I mean, this should just work. And I know there are tweaks that you can install that will basically allow everything to run in the background, so you don't actually have to click on the app and open it. It can run in the background. But once again, that'll revert back to my very first point, which is battery life. And I go with a very minimalistic look, and I'm still having issues with battery life. I mean, in terms of the tweaks I've got installed, there's very little here that is purely aesthetic, in terms of it's there just to maybe change the icons or something. I'll touch on that a little later on anyway. But I don't have a lot of extra stuff running, as a lot of jailbroken devices, they'll have widgets, they'll have all sorts. And I did try that for a little while, and it was just constantly hot, the phone, and battery life was just dropping in front of your eyes. So for that reason, obviously it's the extra headache that comes with having this particular type of jailbreak. Right, so the next one is, as I've literally just touched on somewhat, so tweaks that look good on paper but don't perform in the real world usage. So one example of this is basically the Peep app that I've got installed. Now this one's actually been rectified somewhat, because originally when it comes, it'll be like this. So say for example you're on a list, and I think I might need to actually respring before that actually kicks in. Yeah, possibly. But essentially Peep is meant to, yeah, it's still, there you go. So Peep is a simple tweak where it literally just disables the time and notifications. So it cleans up your home screen, if you like. So on the home screen, when you've got it disabled, it looks good. Now the problem comes when you've kind of forgotten that you've installed that. You go into something and you're used to just tapping the top of the screen to scroll back up. So in this list, normally I would literally just tap the top and it'll go back up. Now because I have that tweak installed, I've got to then change it to a double tap, and as you can see, it takes a few attempts before it'll actually kick in. But essentially right now, so double tap, and now it's working. But if I'd left that on the default settings, I could no longer use the automatic return to top function. And it's not just that either. I've got a few tweaks installed where, for example, I think SAW is the name, where it gets rid of the home bar at the bottom. Now quite a few times, because this is now giving you more usable space down here at the bottom, you try and click on the icon, and instead of that, what happens is you actually invoke whatever gesture you've actually got enabled there instead. I've noticed whilst editing videos quite often in LumaFusion, all of these bottom ones tend to be almost unusable in terms of, let me just delete that project. Most of these bottom icons are pretty much unusable because anytime you try and click on them, you end up invoking the actual swipe gesture instead. So all of these tweaks, they seem to have side effects that you don't really think of initially when you're first installing them. Even the fact that I've got 6 icons on this dock, a lot of the times just being able to click some of these, you'll end up invoking, as I have there, notification center, because you're swiping up on it. If I try and click on Cydia, it's invoking my control center. So not everything actually works as it seems to initially, and I've seen a lot of the extra like Prism, and I think one of them was called Dock or something like that, where it basically gives you extra UI interface and things like that. And you also have the ones where you have the, similar to the Samsung one, where you'll have a sidebar here. It's how you actually interact with these that on paper they look really cool, and when you see the pictures of them on social media and you go into the Cydia tweaks and you look at them there, they all look great. But when it comes to real world usage, a lot of the times things just get in the way. They'll end up causing problems. For me, for example, on all of these, I'll have tweaks where I had Maple 2 installed, and it would bring up a little gesture, a little icon when I was actually charging. Now the problem was it'd stay on there as a notification, and once I'd actually get rid of this, if I clicked cancelled it, I'd go back to the lock screen again and it'd be there again. So it's all the kind of side effects of installing these tweaks that just make the experience of using your phone different, and in some circumstances actually worse as well. So that's the next one, and that brings me on nicely to what I call the new car smell, or new car factor, which is essentially the wow factor of having the jailbreak wears off pretty quickly. So the jailbreak, I think, has only been out for maybe a week or so now, and I've already got to the point where I'm not really coming into Cydia to check for new tweaks and stuff, because generally whatever I have installed, it's just going to slow it down. It's just going to make the experience worse. So you almost get to the point where this UI that I have, where I have all the icons brought down, the fact that I can have more icons, all of these kind of things, I like the fact that I can do that. But essentially none of this has really changed the way in terms of how I interact with the device. So I will still have to end up clicking into the icons that I'm used to using. The only difference is the fact that it's slightly more usable on this particular tweak. So out of all the tweaks I have, just this Home Plus beta is probably one of the best ones, just because it gives me flexibility in terms of putting all these kind of things on. However, what I'll do is, if we come down to Snowboard, and I'll show you what I mean by, so let's just enable that. And the good thing about this is it can actually enable whilst everything's running. So let's go into, let's enable, and the whole point of Snowboard is obviously the fact that you can have loads of different things. Now when you install things like this, where you've got a theme running, and you might have just noticed there was actually a drop frame there, and that's my point. As soon as you change the UI, you're creating this scenario where you're basically causing drop frames. But anyway, that's by the by. The issue with regards to this particular detriment, if you like, is the fact that a lot of times you'll install tweaks and they look great. And I'm trying to think of which one it was where, yeah, something like that, for example. It looks great. And even this one is not too bad in terms of trying to figure out what's what. But a lot of times, and there once again, another drop frame, you'll install tweaks that look amazing, but once you actually come back to your home screen, it's changed the icon so much that if I come into here, for example, all of these are different. And a lot of the times, especially when you get rid of icon labels, you're used to just looking at it and clicking the icon without actually reading the name of the icon. Now, Facebook, Twitter, App Store, those ones are all pretty self-explanatory. But when you come down to something like that, I mean, what is that? That I had one, I can't remember which theme it was. I may have actually got rid of it now. But the home icon and the Cydia icon was so similar that I was ending up clicking onto the same icon multiple times, because basically I was trying to go into home or Cydia or vice versa, and I was just clicking on the wrong one. All of these kind of things, they look great, but in real world usage they don't tend to actually be very they're not convenient. And that's one of the things that I tend to jailbreak for. So the convenience, so reaching up to the top right to pull down control center is inconvenient when you've got all your icons down like this at the bottom. So having the fact that you can swipe up at the bottom and enable control center is a convenience. But what I find is whilst I'm actually using apps and I'm trying to switch between tabs at the bottom of an app, it's invoking control center or it's invoking notification center when maybe I want to just click on search or click on Cydia, and it's just that extra issues that it gives you. And as I said, having all of these themes and everything, it looks great, but once you factor in the detriment to your battery life, the extra heat the phone generates, and also the fact that you'll get bored of these pretty quickly. As with anything, as with your new phones, you go out, you get a new phone within, say, I'd say probably, depending on whether it's a yearly thing for you or whether it's a maybe 2 yearly thing, I'd say maximum is between 2 weeks and a month. Any new device, any new piece of technology, between 2 weeks and a month. Even cars I've noticed this a lot with, where you'll buy a new car and for the first month or so it's all really good, you're exploring, you're looking at the different dash options, all these kind of things, and then after say a month, by that time you're at the point where you don't even think about it, you just sit in there and you just use it as a tool. And it's exactly the same with your phones. At the end of the day, most people are using these as tools in order to achieve whatever they want to actually achieve with them. It's not the fact that it looks cool or anything like that. Your cameras, you want them there to take the photos. You don't really care how you interact with those, the software and having the extra options and things like that. I mean, the 4K 60 thing that people made a massive deal about, being able to change the functions within the camera app. So if I click onto video, having this in the top right, being able to change between the different modes, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've actually used that. Generally because I know how I like to film. I like to film in 4K 60. So generally these kind of things, whilst yeah they can be useful every now and then, in the long run is having a tweak that will slow down your camera experience to get that ported into your device, because obviously it's natively on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, but on other devices it won't be. I'm pretty sure there's a tweak out there that will give you that option, but it will cause stutter and drop frames and a loss of performance. Now, is that worth the handoff in order to have that option there that you may only use maybe once a month? That's basically what I'm getting at in terms of these themes. Having the icons look different and look cool, yeah, it's good in terms of customizing it and making it unique, but ultimately you're losing the actual smoothness and the fluidity that you get with iOS in order to achieve that. So is that handoff worth it for you? That's ultimately what it comes down to. Coming on to my final one, and I've touched on this before, it's the random crashes overnight. I've actually had it on my personal phone as well. So I had I think it was 2 days ago where I used the battery down to about 20%. So in the past, before jailbroken state, I would only ever charge my phone overnight. I've even under heavy usage, the maximum I've ever had to actually recharge my phone was once during the day, and that would be fast charge on the plug-in charger. Every other scenario where I've charged my phone, it's overnight and pick you up in the morning and it's fully charged. 2 days ago I came to my phone and it basically resprung, restarted. The battery was on 20% when I put it on charge. It was quite warm, but everything looked like it was working perfectly fine. I came to it in the morning and obviously something had obviously triggered in the background, and this is obviously without me having any interaction. Always on display was off. Nothing was actually running apart from, I think it may be Maple 2 that was on there, but even that, with the screen off, there's no reason for it to actually have kicked in or anything. Came to in the morning and basically the phone had restarted and I had to rerun Unc0ver in order to jailbreak. It's just all of these extra little headaches that you get with jailbreaking. Now, having said all of that, obviously jailbreaking is still really cool, and it does actually have a kind of unwritten advantage, which is the fact that one of the reasons I actually stopped jailbreaking was the fact that, well, there's two main reasons. Mainly because I'd always have the newest device, and generally the newest devices wouldn't be able to be jailbroken even to a semi-tethered state as we have now, where most of the work can be done on the phone, and you don't have to physically plug it back into a PC or over Wi-Fi and rerun Alt-Store or something like that, for example. Even putting that aside, one of the reasons was the fact that as jailbreaks get more popular, and especially tweaks get more popular, what we've seen over the years is all of the tweaks generally get copied by Apple anyway. Well, not all of them, but all of the popular ones. So a lot of the stuff that I used to use, like Control Center, all these kind of things, generally they all get ported over to the newest versions of iOS anyway. So a lot of the times, and especially with iOS 12 through till 13 up to the current version, most of the stuff that I used to actually use was already in iOS. So the way I used to look at it was, do I need to jailbreak the phone in order to get one or two extra little things that I'm going to use every now and then? For example, this home layout. On this home layout, generally the apps I use are very limited. So having all of these folders on the top rows is useful. The fact that I don't have to swipe to the second page, and also the fact that I can have more icons along the dash, and it's just little things that make it more useful. But in the long run, can I do that same thing on, let's say, iOS 14? So when iOS 14 comes out, I'm assuming they're going to have copied some of the popular jailbreak tweaks anyway, and they'll introduce some of their own nuances that will actually maybe not work in the same way, but it'll do a very similar thing. I mean, we've already heard of how they're going to be introducing, similar to, I think it's Velux, where you can have widgets for your weather icon and your clock icon, certain icons. They're going to introduce where you can have certain icons slightly bigger. Little things like that. So they will already be implementing certain things, but when iOS 14 comes out, obviously at that point more than likely I'll be on the iPhone 12 anyway. More than likely that won't be jailbreakable. So for that reason, initially my experience is going to be straight with iOS on the device. But one of the main reasons will be the fact that obviously, if everything gets copied over for the most part that you actually use, and it's only small things that you lose out on, so maybe just having extra icons in the dock, well, you kind of learn to live with it, don't you? You learn to live with, maybe if you can't have 6 icons like I've got here, out of these, generally the ones I use the most are Cydia, but obviously if you're not jailbreaking, you lose that. So already I'm down to 5. So you've got Studio, YouTube Studio, you've got the camera app, you've got LumaFusion, and then out of the next two, probably Safari is the main one that I actually use. The mail app, generally I actually have push notifications and push mail and everything like that disabled, because I prefer to just pull everything through when I actually go into it, and that's actually how I get such good battery life from my devices. I'll actually make a separate video explaining generally on new devices I tend to get upwards of 10 hours screen on time. Yes, 10 hours of screen on time, not just standby and everything like that. I can actually get 10 hours of usage. On this particular device, I believe when I first got it, through my first 2 to 3 weeks of testing, I was getting close to 12 hours screen on time. That's whilst on 4G, Wi-Fi, and a mixture of everything. So that's not just sat at home playing YouTube videos or something like that, something really, or just playing back videos without actually using any data. That's through real world usage. So I will make a separate video on basically what things I disable, what I tweak in order to get the best battery life. But realistically, if the jailbreak's gone, then essentially I'll end up with these 4 icons, and I could live with that. It'd make it a little bit more awkward in terms of not having the extra things there, but it's not a deal breaker, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. The jailbreaks in the past, they were almost necessary in order to get things out of your device. So iOS, I believe it was the iPhone 4 was the first one that I actually had. I can't remember what iOS version, maybe iOS 6 or something was on it at the time, maybe even 5, I can't remember exactly. But back then, obviously, iOS was a lot more limited in terms of what you could do. So the jailbreak was almost necessary. Whereas today, with the way iOS has progressed, and hopefully with the way it keeps progressing, with them pinching little tweaks here and there, we'll get to the point where almost 90% of everything that you would install will be there anyway. I mean, one of the things that potentially they could just fix themselves anyway would be the battery life. That's probably the first in the top right here, having the percentage there. That's probably the first things that they'll actually fix in the coming one with the smaller notch anyway. Obviously, one of the reasons they didn't have it there was the fact that if you don't have the screen real estate, they prioritize the battery icon. I believe one of the reasons they actually went away from having the percentage, I'm not 100% sure if this is true or not, but one of the reasons was, and this is one of the reasons why by default it's actually also disabled in iOS as well. So you have to actually go in and switch on, even on the devices that can show the battery percentage, you have to actually go in and switch battery percentage on. One of the reasons for that is actually battery anxiety, and it's I read that it's basically for people that don't like having the percentage there, because it just causes them anxiety and causes them to plug in when they don't necessarily need to. If you have an icon that until it gets to yellow or red, you don't even think about it, you just carry on using it. By having a percentage there, it's almost constantly telling you your battery is dropping, and it almost causes you to plug it in when you don't necessarily need to. So that's just one of those things. But as I say, hopefully as iOS versions continue to progress, I am hoping that jailbreaks stick around, because obviously it is quite useful and is quite fun to play about with as well, and also to come up with different variants in terms of what you can actually do with it. But ultimately, people that buy iPhones, they're not buying it on the premise that it's going to be jailbroken. If you're doing that, then basically you're going to be losing out. You're going to be having a worse experience than if you just understand what it's actually about and take it for what it is. The flip side of that is obviously the people that use it for productivity. Anybody who's using it as their almost like a business device, as essentially you could consider that's what I'm doing with regards to this whole channel. My whole channel is being run pretty much off just my iPhone. I'm using my iPad generally, occasionally, just for thumbnails and things, just to make it easier, but I could potentially run my entire channel off just my iPhone, and for the most part it's pretty much unaffected at the moment. But who's to say that one of these tweaks, YouTube for example, if YouTube, it's unlikely that they would do it, but if YouTube put in jailbreak detection instantly, that'd be a lot of uploaders that basically would just get rid of the jailbreak for that very reason. But anyway, as this was only meant to have been a short video, and as with all of these kind of videos, these reasons for and reasons against kind of videos that I tend to do, it seems to have dragged on for quite a while. So what I'll do is I'll call it a day at that now. Before I do finish, what we'll just touch on again is obviously the fact that if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. I will still have quite a few different jailbreak videos coming out until the point I decide that I'm basically reverting back. I still have other devices that I can actually test it out on anyway, but in the meantime, obviously, if you, as I say, 90%, even still, I was looking at my channel analytics yesterday, and around 90 to 93% of my viewers are still not subscribed to my channel. So obviously, if you have enjoyed the videos, if you found them useful, please do hit the like icon, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and that'll notify you of any new videos upcoming. And until the next one, thank you very much for watching.